The devil's ways exposed. If I were the devil, I would distort the ways of God beyond your wildest imagination. So get set, for you're about to be exposed to a thought-provoking concept designed to reveal the big picture for the why of this world in rapid fashion. The concept could upset or anger many, but don't forget the story of Jonah wishing to die because things turned out different than he thought they should. At any rate, most of us have heard the old cliche, God works in mysterious ways, maybe far more mysterious than we have imagined. By the way, I'm Ed Sager, a guy with a passion for writing about a gospel from Christ, the good news that Jesus came to give, which could be shockingly different than you might expect. Because Jesus did say that he had more to tell us, more than we were ready for at the time. So get set for my rendition of what was held back long ago, as John 16:12 describes. First off, we must know that God in his infinite wisdom has a solid reason for such a chaotic world. A reason that stems off the biblical fact that rebellion against God began with Lucifer in the heavenly control center and not with Adam and Eve. The rebellion was motivated by a desire to be like the Most High, finding Lucifer campaigning throughout the universe that he had a superior way of running the government. So would it come as a total shock to realize that God has allowed the spirit of superiority over others to infiltrate the entire spiritual world, every religion on the planet? For what better way for God to demonstrate the evil ways of Lucifer's mindset than to allow his thoughts of superiority to run rampant throughout the world? The point being, do you know of any religion not claiming to be the superior one? For God to allow all the different religions could be evidence to his ways of exposing the superiority mindset as a downward path to evil. For remember, God works in mysterious ways. So if you're listening, my intent is to reveal God's ways to everyone, God the Father, that is, as our loving heavenly parent, ready to pick us up and dust us off in our journey back home. And if we were observant, we may even see the Father running out to meet us. But we must understand that the devil has distorted and changed this picture of God into an unforgiving dictator of perfection, requiring certain things before granting forgiveness. But good news, hidden good news, has been proclaimed in John 14 when Jesus asked Philip a question. Now I'm suggesting that we all put ourselves in the place of Philip as Jesus asks the question. Don't you know me, Philip, even after I've been among you such a long time? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. Next, in John 17, it's recorded that Jesus said he had completed the work he was given to do, that of revealing the Father to us. So if we were to really pay attention, we might notice that God the Father is just like Jesus, just as gracious and forgiving as he. And if the good news of that is not the hidden pearl of great value, I don't know what is. So to begin with, just in case you don't know, God the Father has gone to great lengths in allowing misunderstandings for a while, in order to answer to a universe-wide controversy over his ways and character. The basic premise in the misunderstanding could be described as a huge detour, a detour orchestrated by the devil, that centered on the concept that Jesus is pleading our case before the Father. You know, the good guy, bad guy concept? In other words, world religions have Jesus negotiating and mediating with the Father in our behalf, when in reality, it's the other way around. Jesus was sent as an ambassador from heaven to reveal the Father to us. Remember, Jesus did say, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. And to go along with that, another biblical fact. John 16:26 describes a total different picture, with Jesus saying he does not have to plead the Father in our behalf. Why? Because the Father loves us the same as he does. For you see, if the truth be known, all heaven, the angels, Jesus, and yes, even God the Father, are all pleading with you and me to come away from the evil that is sure to harm us. So with rebellion being alive and well, what better way for God to handle the rebellion problem than to make a world and allow his enemy the lordship over it? I think it's called give the enemy enough rope and, well, you know the rest. So how has the enemy structured his strategy against God, if not packaging it in the finest of linen? In other words, being very crafty, placing his accusations against God right within our most holy places of worship. So since God really is the one in control, doesn't it make sense that God surely must have a very significant reason for allowing the devil the lordship over this world for a while? Remember the story of Job, where the devil was allowed to do bad things to Job. Maybe we need to realize that in God allowing all the bad stuff, it must have something to do with revealing the ways of the devil, especially after he was insistent in campaigning throughout the universe that he had a better or a superior way of governing the universe. For if we were to really think about it, we have tons of evidence over the years of how the world of politics works. You know how an opponent will tend to distort the character of the one they're running against? Well, one doesn't have to dig very deep to discover Lucifer's campaign strategy was to distort the ways of God throughout the universe. And as biblical history has recorded, Lucifer was somewhat successful as he persuaded about 1/3 of the angels to follow him. So inserting this part of history into our understanding, maybe a question should be asked about how we are supposed to make sense out of the picture of God that would have him torturing in some alleged down-under place called hell anyone that would refuse him. But in the other hand, with the devil having the lordship over this world, is it any wonder that most all religions teach this concept in one form or another? But in their defense, maybe there is a valid reason for God allowing the concept, in that many wouldn't have come away from their evil ways any other way than being scared from what would happen if they didn't. Maybe we should consider God's method of training to have included us being deceived in this regard for a while. Simply remember that Jesus did say he had more to tell us. So moving on, the inspiration for this article came from both a desire to reveal what I've been shown, as well as a video from the late Paul Harvey bearing the title, If I Were the Devil. Now within this presentation, there is one thing we never want to forget. God is the one in control, not the devil. And if you're really open to listening, you might just pick up on how God in the end will have evil in check to never stick its ugly head up again. Now with your seatbelt fastened and your mind open, get set for a mythbuster of all mythbusters in exposing the ways of the devil. So to begin with, if I were the devil, I would set out to distort the character of God within churches around the world. I would make it seem, however, that I was only involved in evil, because that would be my best disguise. If I were the devil, I would have the whole world following, one way or another, after my distorted concepts of God. I would accomplish this by setting the stage for hero worship, where the masses would follow their emotions instead of godly principles. I would begin by distorting the purpose of the cross. In other words, I would distort the reason for why Christ came to earth. My distortion would be such good news to the masses, it would tend to cover up the lies that I have spread throughout the universe about God being arbitrary, exacting, vengeful, unforgiving, and severe. So in order to insert the cover-up, I would distort the meaning of rules. I would dilute the rules of life, the way God made us to function, over to making rules appear to be nothing more than arbitrary legal rules. So with this twist in place, my next move as the devil would be to lure God's first earthly created into believing a huge lie about death, that no one really dies. This lie is sure to lead Eve into breaking what is now thought to be legal rules. Next, I would stack rules upon rules, hundreds of them, making the rules far beyond any level of reason. I would make it seem as though God was so exacting to his rules that he would kill anyone that broke them. And to really confuse the issue, I would have the biblical scholars saying that God made everyone to be eternal beings. In other words, no one really dies? If I were the devil, I would have the masses believe in this, regardless of what's recorded in Ecclesiastes 9, that the dead know nothing, as well as 1 Timothy 6, stating that only God is immortal. I would attempt to bypass this by making a play on words, telling them that when life ends here, they will be alive in Jesus. Next, I would twist some biblical stories that would seem to portray God as so vengeful and severe that he had actually made a place of torture, a down-under place of torture called hell, for anyone refusing to love and obey him. As you'll soon discover, the devil's lies that life goes on in another place is very important in proving his accusations against God. So with this concept in place, I would continue by telling the masses that this torturing place of hell is God's divine justice. And if anyone wants to be saved from this fate, they would have to make a choice of where they wanted to spend eternity, in heaven or hell. I would tell them all they needed to do is to believe. Believe in the mechanics of Jesus fulfilling every requirement for them. This is sure to promote more hero worship. I would then tell the masses they didn't have to know how it works, but to simply believe it by faith. Now, this is where my most effective setting for hero worship comes into play, is when it's assumed that Jesus takes the sinner's place in the death they were told they deserved. I would also tell them that the plan was based on a concept that without the shedding of blood as an appeasement or an atonement, there would be no forgiveness from the Father. This is sure to establish God the Father as unforgiving. Next, as the devil, in order to get the masses to overlook or not notice the Father as unforgiving, I would present the plan with an abundance of free gifts, which is sure to include the free gift of his only Son Jesus to meet every requirement necessary for being saved. For you see, as the devil, I'll get the masses to follow Jesus for the free gift benefits instead of the principles that Jesus stands for. I would so mix this up with their emotions that they would not notice me changing the reason for Christ's death on the cross. In fact, I would have them thinking that God the Father had killed Christ instead of you and me. I would accomplish this by changing the meaning of being at one with the ways of God over to a meaning of Christ dying as an appeasement or an atonement to satisfy the alleged legal death penalty for breaking the rules. This concept is sure to cover up the real reason for the sacrifice of Christ. For you see, the real reason was to change the thoughts within you and me. For in our rebellion against God, Christ laid himself down to allow you and me to nail him to the cross. The design was meant to sicken us to the core as we discover what we have done. But if I were the devil, I would switch all that over to Christ taking our place, sacrificing himself for us, dying the death that we allegedly deserve for breaking the rules. This is sure to have the masses praising the person of Jesus as their hero. Next, as the devil, I would fill the world with thousands of different spiritual groups and have them throwing mud at each other by arguing and fighting over each one's exclusive and superior ways to heaven. Along with this, I would cause fear, uncertainty, and confusion among them by saying that God is love, but he is also just. Therefore, insinuating that if they didn't believe certain things, the result of God's justice would have them burning in the torturing flames of hell forever and ever, or at least as long as they might deserve. I would also have the masses so mesmerized with the person of Jesus as their hero for saving them from all that, they would never notice me twisting some scriptural wordings in order to change the meaning. One of which would be to twist the words of 2 Timothy 3:16, so as to have the masses believing that every word in hundreds of translations was inspired or God-breathed. With this concept in place, I could have them worshiping the Bible instead of the one the Bible is about. I could then change and twist meanings to make it appear that the Father was so exacting to perfection that only the perfect blood of Jesus would satisfy the Father's demands. I would also make it clear that the Father's ways were so tough and hard to deal with that Jesus would have to be their mediator and attorney, which, by the way, it said that he has never lost a case. This is sure to firm up more hero worship, as Jesus is allegedly negotiating in their behalf in hopes of gaining forgiveness from the Father. I would have them so wrapped up in their own superior interpretations of how to be saved, they would fail to see my lies about God as an issue, because all they would choose to see is what Jesus has and will do for them. For you see, getting the masses to believe every word by faith is sure to have them paying no attention to what my lies would make God the Father look like. For it would be a non-issue, as they would be so blinded with hero worship, they would simply refer to my lies about God as his divine justice. So simply understand, as the devil, part of my design would be to deceive the whole world with a hero worship concept, making what Jesus did for them outweigh any other issue. For this, again, is sure to have the emotional level high enough to take the attention off of what my distorted plan of salvation would make God the Father look like. So again, as the devil, I would have the masses believing that the death of Jesus was to pay their legal penalty, which is sure to have their emotions deep into serving their hero from a stance of love and obligation, ready to believe anything their hero says. This is really very dangerous, because what if you thought I was your hero Jesus, but instead I was really the devil, telling you to kill or shun anyone that didn't believe the same as you? So the shocking question could be, are we sure we know God? So what do you think? Is it too far-reaching to realize that the devil has hoodwinked the entire world of religion into believing that God the Father requires the better blood of Jesus as a sacrifice or an appeasement before granting forgiveness? Maybe a question should be asked. What would that concept make the Father out to be, if not an unforgiving extortionist? Well, there you have it. The devil has done an overwhelming job in having the inhabitants of this world believing his lies about God. For you see, the real reason for the cross of Calvary was not to pay the legal penalty for sin, but instead it's meant to change the hearts of God's created as we come to an understanding that in our rebellion against God, it is us, symbolically, that whip and crucify the Son of God. It's meant to sicken and change the heart after discovering we have whipped and crucified our Creator. For the real purpose of the cross is to change our minds, not the Creator's. For like any parent, the Creator is sure to be found pleading with us children to turn from what is sure to harm us, not to kill us for missing the mark. So wouldn't it be better good news that Jesus came to reveal the Father as being just like Him, just as gracious and forgiving as He? But lastly, if I were the devil, I would cover that up with massive confusion about what God is really like. And if you've been alert in listening, you just might notice the whole world being led astray, just as Revelation 12 and 13 describes. So until next time, good day.